You know, with such a intro, I was a little confused because should I just walk on stage or should I dance on my way on stage? But lucky for everyone, I decided to walk, So thank you everyone for coming. I hope you've been enjoying all the different presentations so far. My presentation today will be on the untapped power of private equity. So if I should borrow some terms from Jason, I'm going to peel away the onion. That's correct, Jason? Oh, yes. I may not use that other term though, but we'll get there. All right, so private equity funds are a pool of actively managed capital that invests primarily in private companies with the intent of creating value in companies in which they invest. And they do this by improving operations, reducing costs, selling non-core assets, and maximizing cash flow. So private equity, or PE as it's initialized, is one of the largest and fastest growing alternative investment asset class in the world. And with strong fundamentals, large investors are allocating large amount of capital to private equity. PE represents the bridge between internal financing for a company and capital market activity. And, they offer highly structured financial contracts to companies that are in most instances, I would say, informationally opaque. PE firms provide competent capital or smart money. And this is a combination of investment banking services, which we also provide at Sygnus, and management consulting. So it's almost like a PE investor comes in and you'll have an investment banking team and also an management consultant within your business to push that business ahead. PE firms therefore take the role of financial intermediary and provide information for financial institutions or institutional investors such as pension funds, banks, insurance companies through the utilization of techniques such as screening, contracting, and monitoring to assess the quality of the company you're invested in, thereby reducing information asymmetries. PE firms not only provide money, but they also advise on risk management, marketing, strategy, networking. And this generally involves a more personal relationship between these PE managers and the entrepreneur for the portfolio companies. Now, if we look on the effect of the pandemic, let me give you a little story. We launched Sygnus in February 2020. We made our first investment, I would say, in January 2020. And, by April 1, revenue in our first investment was zero. So while I anticipate the call from Mr. Zaka, I thought to myself, this is typical of what happens when you should have a very good strategy going into an investment. And throughout the entire pandemic, if you look what happened in the US, private equity deal making reached historic heights in 2021. And this is on the back of trillions being pumped in the global markets to level the effect of the pandemic on ordinary households. Private equity set new annual records in global deal volume and ended the year at approximately 1.2 trillion. And this is the greatest it has been throughout the time series. Now, if we look deeper, if we focus on the last bar, as you can see, for North America, it's the highest you have seen in history. Europe has outperformed every year before. If you look on Asia Pacific, the deals have been growing as well. And the rest of the world, even though it's a small amount, we still see growth there. Now, if we look closer on private equity in emerging markets and developing economies, if we look on the strategy that we have to employ here, the strategies will differ significantly from what we see in developed markets. So in developing economies, the emphasis is primarily on growth and efficiency improvement. In developed markets, they focus mainly around leverage and multiple expansion. This PE strategy of emphasizing growth and efficiency improvement causes investments in developing markets to be less sensitive to cyclical and macroeconomic shocks, which results in PE investments in EMDEs to outperform investments in developed markets during periods of global macroeconomic shocks. In developed markets, there's a large set of investment opportunities for PE investors. I think a lot of us in here can recognize throughout the region, you see a transaction here or there, say, I would really love to have some private equity to invest in this opportunity. Right, Mr. Azan? And when we look in developed market, what we see is a greater affinity of owners of companies to relinquish control of their businesses over to private equity investors. In the Caribbean, in emerging markets, it's less of a driver, because in these markets, the companies, large companies, are normally family-owned, and then there is lack of agreement around how investors should play a role in their companies. So what we do in developing markets, the screening mechanism is quite different. And this is as a result of the volume of deals is considerably lower, and these are driven mostly through personal and professional networks and building on client relationships from other areas of business by the PE fund manager. So such as Sygnus, we leverage relationships that we've established in the private credit business. So what is the role of private equity in emerging markets and developing economies? So for companies, private equity can be a critical source of financing, especially for innovative small and medium-sized companies in places where debt financing is limited and capital markets are less developed. A significant majority of medium-sized businesses in EMDEs are privately run with no succession planning. We see that a lot throughout the region, and as these business owners get older, they want to successfully pass on their business or the wealth that they have generated, but in a lot of instances, the family is no longer interested in running the business. Business may not be sexy enough, and they want to do something else that is more trendy and so forth. So PE provides a role there of coming into these firms and providing a succession planning, and there are certain exits, can be sold to a strategic investor, or we can do an IPO. Private equity firms provide an opportunity for owners to, as I discussed, look at succession planning and reducing their concentration risk. So a lot of rich entrepreneurs, all their wealth is concentrated within their business. So if something happens at the latter year of their lives, then they can reduce the amount of wealth that can be bequeathed to their children. One big thing that because PE firms are normally well established with a good governance structure, and these PE firms provide support for improving firms' operation, governance, and their capital structure, thereby improving operational efficiency, increasing cash flow, and generating a higher return on equity. For investors in private equity companies that focus on the EMDEs, in emerging markets, these markets provide significant opportunity for private equity returns. It also provides diversification to your traditional portfolio, and it's a long-term driver of wealth for investors who want to invest their wealth as they generate more free cash flow. So if we look in the USA, PE firms have generated returns that are 16% higher than the S&P 500 from 1961. Emerging markets are untapped, and therefore the reason being is that there's less competition within emerging markets. You don't have a lot of established PE funds, and the large private equity firms in developed markets, because of the information asymmetry, don't find it interesting to invest in these markets. And the next thing that we see, in especially what we do at Sygnus, is when we see a low penetration of private credit or access to bank credit by business is low, then this provides a great opportunity for PE investments and therefore investors to the investors in these funds. So if we look on the challenges that we've recognized, I think a lot of us in here will know that for a private equity investment, analysts normally start with analyzing historical financial statements, and this is following the analysis. They'll do a valuation and then how they can add value to this investment. In developing markets, what we see there are various factors and risks to take into account, which make the valuation challenging. And one big thing that we see is the poor quality of record keeping. So, even large private businesses in some instances don't have properly organized books. So it takes more time for the team now to go in, analyze, and then establish a value for these investments. It makes it difficult then to project or forecast cash flow, and the scarcity of readily available market and macroeconomic data just compounds the problem. So there's a difficulty in estimating discount rates. Our next issue, and this is one of the biggest issues that we face, is exit. In developed markets, a very successful exit strategy is by way of initial public offering. But in the Caribbean, for instance, there's not, apart from Jamaica, there's no other robust stock market within the region. In developing markets, what we see now is exits by IPO are not so frequent. Maybe because we're so used to being in Jamaica, seeing listings on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, we might think that it is commonplace, but it actually not. When you move outside of Jamaica, exit through IPO is very, very limited. So as these markets become more developed and, Barris hosts more awareness forums like these, we'll have the markets continue to develop, and exit challenges that are present now by developing markets will diminish over time. And the growing number of multinational companies in emerging markets, here in Jamaica, a Digicel, a Scotiabank, and regional markets like companies like Sagicor, what you'll see is that there'll be more and more interest in what is going on within these markets when these larger players are present. Talking about the Caribbean, so if we select the 25 or so countries in the Caribbean, this includes like Guyana, Belize, and even Puerto Rico. We have a combined GDP of approximately 370 billion. And it is led by Puerto Rico, which, it's a U.S. territory, followed by the Dominican Republic at $80 billion. Trinidad and Tobago is 21 billion. Haiti, 15 billion. And Jamaica at 14 billion. So as you can see, the Caribbean is really, the GDP is dominated by 2 countries within the region. So private equity in the Caribbean is presented with various risks and challenges, such as the non-existence of or underdeveloped capital markets, which makes financing of acquisition with leverage more expensive and difficult. And you have, in instances when there are certain shocks to these economies, you have a sudden and unexpected change in fiscal or tax policy, and this further leads to incongruence in tax policies across the region. So within the Caribbean, there's a greater degree of navigation. I think Barry's touched on it this morning, where, for us to establish these vehicles to grow the alternative asset space, we have to be, skipping all throughout the Caribbean to say, where do we incorporate these vehicles and so forth. So it makes the investing process and establishment of private equity funds more difficult. Now, in addition, what we find is that we need to have investors that have a more flexible mindset and a prudent and diligent approach to private equity investing. With development of these markets, however, and the experience gained by investors as we make them more and more aware, we start with small transactions and then we move on. Then what we see, these challenges will be reduced and become easier to tackle over time. To find target markets for our investments, investors should focus on medium to long-term growth forecasts. So this is not like the US where you look and you say, okay, we can jump in and out of a transaction within a 3-year period due to the high growth rate of and the high level of entrepreneurship in these countries. In the Caribbean, we have to be more diligent, patient, and apply a greater degree of what I'd say, care to these investments that we undertake. The next thing that you see is there's a generally, weak legal system in the Caribbean. Some countries have a mixture of common law and what's the other one? Common law and what the Dutch system or the French system in. Yes, civil law. Thank you. So when you have all that differences in laws throughout the entire Caribbean, Puerto Rico has U.S. law, then it makes it a little bit more challenging to do business in the region. And one thing that we've recognized, though there are differences and challenges in the legal system, we find that Caribbean markets have strong contract enforcement, which makes private equity investment a possibility. Strong bankruptcy laws. We've implemented our bankruptcy laws, I think, probably 10 years now. And there's strong property rights. So though there are challenges across the region, the components that are necessary to make our investments more viable are present in these markets. Now, if we look on our rock in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, I think, in my opinion, Jamaica is one of the most developed capital market in the entire region. And there's a deep and well-established stock exchange in Jamaica Stock Exchange. And you can see they've been, over time, innovating. They've implemented the Jamaica Junior Stock Exchange, which has been very successful. They're putting in other regulations in place now to allow the listing of non-public companies, instruments on the exchange. So in Jamaica, there is a very, very robust stock market. And what this allows is for private equity investing to be exited in Jamaica. Jamaica has the most liquid stock exchange in the region. So if you look at the Dominican Republic with an $80 billion economy, their stock exchange has one company listed. They have a lot of bonds listed on the stock exchange, but only one company is listed. If you look at Jamaica, I think probably almost 100 companies is now listed on the stock exchange. So if you look at bank lending and the existence of an active capital market, I don't think I have to say anything about that in Jamaica. And it provides us now with opportunity to do more leveraged buyout transactions, some of which we're actively working on internally at Sygnus. And one important thing that happened, I would say a little over 10 years ago, is when the government decided that they're going to get their house in order and reduce their dependence on borrowed money from the market. The minister touched on it this morning. And that reduction in their appetite for debt actually reversed the crowding out effect in the private sector, and as such provided more capital for the alternative platform and PE. Again, Jamaica has a very transparent and well-functioning legal system. I think when you look on how our cases go through the courts here, there's really no doubt, even though we wait a little bit longer than what we see in developed markets, but we know that the system works here. The existence of multiple PE firms and large conglomerates, so we have Sygnus, and you have other PE players that operate from Jamaica. And what that does is makes PE investing more accessible to the institutional investors here. And Jamaica is an open economy. There are no or low exchange controls. We know of large economies in the Caribbean that once you put US dollar within those countries, you probably never see it come back out. So, but in Jamaica, there's no problem for an investor to take their US dollars into Jamaica, invest, and then get their money out. Now, let me talk about Sygnus DNEB. And Sygnus DNEB is Sygnus's regional private equity investment company. And it's dedicated to providing equity and mezzanine capital in key growth industries throughout the Caribbean. Focuses on investing in medium-sized companies with revenues between 5 and say 50 million US. And it invests in private or public companies via equity, convertible preference shares, subordinated debt, with some link to the equity capital base of the company. It provides investors, especially institutional investors, with attractive equity returns by strategically investing capital in a portfolio of companies that have strong opportunities to grow revenue and profitability. And some of the industries that we focus on is distribution, financial services, manufacturing, energy, information technology, consumer retail, food and beverage. And we focus our investment at the stage of the company's business life cycle, the expansion, mature, or the opportunistic stage. And DNEB, though we in instances take majority stake in companies, we typically focus on providing equity capital to companies, and thereby our strategy is primarily around taking a minority stake in these companies, applying our governance framework to it, get their financial statement or their reporting standards up to what we'd see in a public company. And we look to invest and exit these investments between 5 to 7 years. And I think that's my presentation. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so very much. The only thing that could have topped your presentation was if you actually danced when you were introduced up here. Somebody said, no. You've seen him dance? You've seen him dance. Oh, no. Fantastic. Thank you so very much for that, that presentation. It's certainly interesting to see all of the time and the energy and the effort. But you mentioned a word that I thought stood out to me. You said care. Of course, everyone wants to make money. Of course, we want returns. We want profitable returns. But everything, and I think every deal that you guys do, I think you speak about that, taking care. I have a question here that says, does DENEB, which is the last part that you spoke on, does DENEB focus on any specific area of private equity?
So DENEB, we really focus our investments on companies that are generating cash flow or has a great affinity to generate free cash flow. And a question from earlier on shows that there's a need for young entrepreneurs, venture entities to get investments, but that will be at phase 2 of or build out of providing equity capital to companies. And the reason is private equity is not so commonplace within the region as yet, and as such, we still have to go to the institutional investors to raise money. The institutional investors have their own concerns about how do we manage risk in investing in these entities. So what we did was to start our investment process at companies that are well established, generating cash flow, and there's a low probability of these companies going bust. But as time progresses, our private equity strategy will expand to include ventures.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Any questions from the room? I have a question here from this gentleman, second row. You can give us your name, where you're from. And we just want to remind those of you who might be watching online to go ahead and use the question and ask tab to participate. Proceed.
So good day, everyone.
Hello.
And Ike. I'm Denzel White, and I am within the Sygnus group.
Welcome.
But I'd like to better understand from Ike, what are some of the tax challenges that you face, that DENEB faces in relation to private equity investments?
Great question.
That's an excellent question, Denzel. And, I think I might ask you to answer the question and be the head of tax. But as joke aside, what we generally see is there's not a standardized tax system throughout the region. And, in some countries, they put tax policy in place to protect the capital within their country. So they have high withholding taxes. In some instances, the corporate income tax for certain entities within specific countries within the region is all the way up to 37%. So the issue that we face is, okay, we want to make an investment in company A, but for us to make that investment in company A and this investment to be viable for Sygnus DENEB, we have to ensure that we structure these transactions in a very, very tax efficient way. Because an investment that generates an internal rate of return of, say, 20% with bad tax planning can turn into, say, 5%. So it's something that throughout the region we have to ensure that at each point when we're doing our investment, we have a proper tax structure in place. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense we do the investment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so very much. Based on the, I have a question here. Front row. Thank you so very much. On this side.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Lucas de Beaufort. I work for IDB Invest, and we invest in private equity and private debt funds in the Caribbean and all of Latin America. And I used to be a private equity manager myself. So I very much relate to all the challenges and opportunities that fortunately you alluded to. One of the things that I have seen, and now from the luxury point of being an investor in these funds, I see is that the most successful ones are those that actually are able to be truly transformative by being active part of the management of the investee companies that they sit in. Does your group have the capacity, and have you had the experience of doing that, of actually being the CEO or actually replacing the CEO of the investee companies that you invest with, and have you seen the transformation that you were hoping for? Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
That's an excellent question, and I'm happy you ask it. Well, I'm happy you're here as well because you're an investor in private equity and private credit. So, you know, we look forward to speaking to you after the after Sygnus Day. But on our platform, what we do is first, the thesis in investing in a company is, when you look at a company, it is a collection of labor and capital that together aims at achieving a particular business objective. At Sygnus, as PE investors, what we tend to do is to focus heavily on the individuals within the company. So for us, the first thing that we do, it's never about the numbers for us initially. It's all about the people in the company. So we look and we say, okay, what is the team like? What is the executive team like? What is the culture within the organization? And if there's a shock to the business, can this team pull the business out of that shock? So that is the first thing that we establish. Otherwise, we're not interested in investment. Now, say we go through due diligence, everything is fine, we make our investment in this entity. We have established now what we call senior advisors within our platform. So these senior advisors, along with someone from the Sygnus team, will sit on the boards of these companies. So the senior advisor is normally versed within that particular industry. So if it's manufacturing, that senior advisor is going to be somebody with a track record in manufacturing and can add value to the investment that we have made. And one member from the Sygnus team will also be there. So what this does is ensure that we can put in place a very good governance structure, a very good council, and as I said before, PE is like having an investment banking and management consulting company within your company. So we apply the good governance. We look to what are the different areas that we can focus on to help the business grow and add value to our investment. So we're not interested in investing in companies that, yes, it's a good company, it's generating good cash flow, and at the end of the day, there's zero growth potential for this entity. It has to be a case where either it is existing or we as the PE managers can add that value to the company.
Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Ike Johnson, founding partner. Thank you so very much for that topic, the untapped power of private equity. Certainly when I go back home in my household, whenever I say PE, it's usually physical education with my daughter. But I'm sure a lot of us know that we're learning about alternative investments. For those of us who are just, the lay people, I certainly will think about private equity and how it can help to be transformational within the region. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause. Thank you.